Welcome to Charts Today. My name is David Linton, and today's edition for Wednesday, the 4th of July, comes to you from London. And of course, Independence Day in the US, so the markets um, won't have their cue from the US today. But we're seeing the dollar just did recover a little bit yesterday, but we are still just short-term bearish, medium-term bullish still. So we haven't activated these downside targets for the dollar. So we do expect the dollar strength to kick back in shortly. The euro just starting to run out of steam as well, failing to make a new high from what we saw at the end of last month, and we are just testing the bottom here. So euro still does have downside potential. Japanese yen, the dollar has fallen through the chart, so that does indicate that the dollar might just be in for a little bit of a short-term sell-off. Sterling is looking a little bit stronger against that weaker dollar, but medium term still looking vulnerable. And against the euro, has managed to recover a little bit above the cloud, but lots of downside targets here still hanging over sterling. If we look at sterling against the Swiss franc, a bit more of a mixed picture here, quite range bound, but still bearish on that medium term chart. And against the Aussie dollar, sterling is just coming back into the cloud. So really quite a lot of sideways movement there. Bitcoin is was down 0.5% overnight, but down this morning, but has been just in a more bullish trend on the short-term chart. We haven't yet activated this medium-term upside target. We need to move higher in order to do that, but the medium and long-term charts are still bearish. The big moves last night with the US stock market, we saw the S&P 500 index down a further 0.5%. This 2700 level for the S&P is now looking pretty critical, and the Nasdaq was really where the sell-off occurred. We saw a lot of tech stocks selling off. Nasdaq down 1.2%. So again, just still looking short-term bearish. Not activating downside targets yet, but new lows would do that, of course. So just a real worry that the Nasdaq is unable to push higher. And if we look at the Dow, that's really showing up there, down 0.5% and in a very clear bearish downtrend. So US stocks looking lower. And the Russell 2000, the broader based index, actually fared better yesterday. It was the majors that really drove prices down. Of course, the markets will be closed today in the US, so not much heads up there. We see the futures, of course, fairly flat. And if we look at the FTSE 100 index, we see here that we are down this morning, really just down 0.25%, and still bearish below the cloud on that short-term chart. Short-term targets to the downside activated, so still a worry. And looking at UK mid-caps, just pushing lower all the time. So again, that bearish short-term nature just showing through. And looking at the DAX in Germany, down about 0.2%, really taking their cue from US markets overnight. CAC Quarante also 2%, 0.2% lower. Tokyo was fairly flat overnight, still looking pretty bearish, and that medium-term transition to bearish is now going to hang over the Japanese market. Hang Seng was down 1%, so Chinese woes still continuing to have an effect here, and we are seeing downside targets activated, and Shanghai down a further 1%. Of course, we have been worried about that for some time. Sensex recovered a little bit, up 0.25%, and the Australian market was actually following the US market, but down about 0.5%. Brent crude sitting at 77.81, just holding on to its gains, looking like it might be running out of steam based on the short-term cloud chart. And Texas Light also just in much the same place. US nat gas sitting at $2.87. Really not changing much there. And if we move to gold, gold sitting at this 12.58 level, having really moved back through the cloud on the short term, we've activated an upside target of 12.91. A lot of work to do for gold to actually turn bullish, but on this long-term chart, we're just pulling back to support at the moment. And this was the time last year where we started to rally early July, so be interesting to see if we do that again. Silver also just through the cloud on the short-term chart, activating a new upside target, 2.8% away, looking a little stronger. US 10-year yield sitting at 2.84%. Just that sell-off yesterday, we saw markets are being more and more spooked by trade wars, and we're seeing that coming through in the yield. The big moves were in tech, and Apple was down some 2%. It's about 1.75%. So looking quite bearish there now, back below the cloud on the short-term chart. Amazon also was saw quite a sell-off overnight, and we see here on the chart that we are just heading lower, down 1.15%. Google, which has been a laggard really through most of the year, was down over 2%, testing new lows. Google just showing that weakness, especially activating a new downside target, 4% lower on Google as well on the short-term chart. So the Google chart still does raise concerns. And Facebook saw quite a big sell-off as well yesterday, down some 2% as well. So we saw on the chart down $4, quite a big move there, 2.3% lower, short-term bearish. So just again, just struggling to really push higher there. And last of all, Microsoft, we saw it was also back below this $100 mark, down 1%, and just looking bearish. So tech is driving things lower. Closed today for the US, but let's see what happens on Thursday and Friday. That's it for today. Until tomorrow, happy Independence Day in the US. Until then, happy charting.